All right, everyone. We enjoy the conversation with Steve Merrill from Wager Talk here at the Voice of College Football every Thursday. Please join us for our Under the Radar selection that we get from Steve each and every week. You can get that by the Patreon route /MarkRogersTV or as a main channel subscriber. Get on over there and get a YouTube membership on our main channel. All right, Steve, let's knock out some key matchups in the SEC, starting with Texas A&M coming off a loss against Alabama as a 3-point dog against Tennessee on the road.
Yeah, we're going to talk about my database simulation for all these games. First, so I run 10,000 simulations through the database on margins, averages, a lot of different factors built in from the season so far and other projections, and I get an average win. And on this one, Tennessee wins by average of 7 points. So this line does look a little short to me for that reason. Hey, Texas A&M's been a play-on team for me for the most part. I've cashed a couple best bets with them this season. We used them in week one. I mentioned them against New Mexico. They won 52-10. Liked them against Monroe in week 3, 47-3 is a big favorite. They haven't been as good in the other games. They're 2-0 straight up ATS, and those games are just 2-2 straight up in ATS, and their other games, which have been more competitive price ranges, all of a -10 favorite or dog. And the reason I liked them in the big blowout games is because I thought coming into this season, two teams were circled as play-on teams in September, and that was A&M and Oklahoma, two teams that vastly underachieved last year. So always look for those type of teams to blow out the weaklings. But A&M has struggled a bit when stepping up in class, and you really do have to worry about the Alabama hangover. Physical game against Alabama, as it always is. Teams often struggle the following week. It was also A&M's second loss of the season. So I do think there's a little bit of line value -3 or less with Tennessee.
Missouri suffered its first loss of the season. It was a difficult one for them as they led by 15 points, but also difficult for Missouri backers as they were getting 5 points and there was only about 15 seconds left in the game. Missouri had the ball and threw a pick six to lose by 10 on the backdoor cover. Bad beat for LSU or against LSU. This time, Missouri goes on the road against Kentucky, coming off a devastating 38-point loss against Georgia.
Yeah, by the way, both these teams have gone over the total 3 straight weeks in a row. They're 6-0 over if you combine their last 3 games. So that's something to keep an eye on. And if Missouri does come a little flat, that might show on the defensive side of the ball. And obviously, Kentucky was up against it last week against Georgia. We talked about both of those games last week here on the channel. I mentioned how LSU was in a tough scheduling spot after that high-scoring loss against Mississippi, having to travel again. Missouri did get out to that early lead, as you referenced, but LSU with that potent offense stormed back. And you do have to wonder if that lingers a little bit for Missouri. And you also have to wonder if it lingers for Kentucky. I talked about A&M coming off the Alabama game. Well, coming off Georgia is just as physical, and that was also the first loss of the season. So these are really two teams in play against situations this week for me. And then on top of that, my database predicts a 3-point win by Kentucky. The line's currently 2.5. Probably a game that's best left alone with all that uncertainty.
We've got Florida and South Carolina getting together, as they always do every year in the SEC Eastern Division. Florida won this game last year 38-6. We've got the Gators as a 2-point dog on the road in Columbia.
Yeah, my database simulation has South Carolina winning this game by 5. So I do think the line's a little short at -2. The value is with South Carolina here. Obviously, a team that's got the better quarterback as well with Spencer Rattler. They're averaging almost 9 yards per pass attempt. Both defenses have been suspect against the pass this year, though, so it could be a high-scoring game as well. And I think the line values with South Carolina, total has dropped all the way down to 51 from 53.5, which I don't quite get. 51.5's out there, other spots 51. I want to point that out because 51 is a very key number, about a 3 to 4% chance it lands right on 51. So at 51 or less, I think the over has some value, and I think South Carolina at -2.5 or less has value as well.
Alabama-Arkansas, a key game in the SEC Western Division, at least for Bama. Arkansas has pretty much tanked the season at 0-3 in the conference, but Bama picked up a big win at Texas A&M last week, and they are a 19.5-point favorite at home.
Yeah, and I want to point that line out because as we do this on Thursday afternoon, I checked the Wager Talk Live odds screen. There's a couple big books out there that have moved to -20. So I would lock in that -19.5 while it is still somewhat widely available. I think this line more likely to hit 20 by the weekend. And I would agree with that move. I like Alabama here. First of all, my database simulation has them winning by 24 on average. And I think you could tack on a couple extra points because Saban really needs to run up the scores now after that loss against Texas. And keep in mind, Oklahoma beating Texas last week was not good for Alabama. It weakens the Texas loss. It also puts them both in the one-loss category, and you got to figure they're going to lose any kind of head-to-head comparison from the voters as well. So Bama has the necessity now to run the scores up when needed, and I think they'll be able to do so against Arkansas, a very mediocre defense that's given up almost 8 yards per pass this year. A lot's been talked about Alabama struggling offensively. They're still averaging 9.2 yards per pass, and I think they're going to have more success than expected through the air this week.
LSU, of course, played another high-scoring game, 80 total points at Missouri last week. Auburn playing some good defense, but they lost to Georgia a couple of weekends ago. Go to Death Valley as an 11-point underdog.
Yeah, on the surface, you could definitely say schedule set up situationally. This is a pretty good setup for Auburn. First of all, they're coming off the bye, extra time to prep. They're the better defensive team, and they've got a good rushing attack as well as an underdog. That always catches your eye. But then I run the database, and my database has liked LSU's offensive explosiveness this year, and it favors them by 15 on average. So the line's a little cheap at -11, but I'm not in a hurry to back this bad defensive LSU team. The concern, though, with Auburn is I don't know if they have enough of a passing attack to catch up if they get behind. If they run the ball and play good D, they could win this game outright or keep it close. But if they get behind, which they likely will at some point, they're average almost 1.5 yards per pass below their defensive opponent's average. So I'm just not sure they can take advantage. And LSU has actually been decent against the pass when you factor in the opponent's play. This is a big step down in class for LSU as far as facing a weak Auburn passing attack. So I think the under in Auburn is somewhat correlated. They need to keep the game close because if it gets out of reach, that's probably when LSU will be able to pull away.
Steve is kind enough to give us a slice of what he does here at the Voice of College Football, but join Steve for the complete look at wagertalk.com. You get the money management system. You get the look at the NFL, of course, college football, Major League Baseball playoffs, and the NBA is coming. And then the under the radar selection that's exclusive to us here at the Voice of College Football, 17-2. I still can't believe it. 17-2 against the spread in those under the radar selections. You get those on the main channel as a member or at patreon.com/MarkRogersTV. Well, Steve, another selection of games here in week 7. We appreciate you stopping by.
Hey, thanks, Mark.